Welcome to the Deep Dive from C9 podcast show. I'm Lex.
And I'm Vera.
Today, we are diving deep into a really critical challenge for Australian business owners and C-level executives. We're talking about developing video consultation software for medical services.
And our mission really is to cut through all the noise, all the dense source material out there, and give you a direct shortcut to making an informed decision.
We really need to unpack why so many of these projects, even the ones that start with the best intentions, just fail, catastrophically even, here in the Australian market.
Yeah, and the context is just huge.
It's massive. The Australian telehealth market isn't just growing, it is absolutely exploding. The sources are projecting, USD 21.8 billion by 2030?
That's right, with a staggering 28% compound annual growth rate.
Yep.
So on one hand, you see this picture of, immense opportunity.
But on the other hand,
you have this massive risk. This is the core conflict in the data we've seen. Despite that booming market, 73% of healthcare organizations face significant, and I mean significant, issues with their platforms inside the first 18 months.
73%. That's not a minority problem. That's the norm.
It is the norm. And we have to stress, these are not just minor bugs. These platforms are critical infrastructure. They handle incredibly sensitive data.
So when they fail, the fallout is huge.
It's severe. I mean, just remember, in 2024 alone, healthcare data breaches compromised over 275 million records globally. The stakes for getting security and compliance right here in Australia are just immense.
Okay, so let's walk that path. How do you get to a 73% failure rate? The pressure on executives was unbelievable during the pandemic. We saw telehealth adoption in Aussie hospitals jump from 20% to, 85%?
All the way up to 85%. And that pressure creates the very first trap, which is what we call the implementation frenzy. It's that fear of missing out, the pressure to beat a competitor, and it leads to this massive failure of process. They just skip the foundational planning.
Right, the we need it yesterday syndrome.
Exactly. And when you bypass proper planning in healthcare IT, the costs are, well, they're staggering.
So what's the typical financial hit?
Look, rushed implementation is the single biggest driver of failure. The average cost for one of these failed projects, it ranges anywhere from $1.2 million up to $8.5 million.
Wow. And that's not even counting the fines, I assume?
Not at all. That figure doesn't even touch the regulatory fines you'll get for cutting corners on compliance.
We saw this play out in the Melbourne private hospital case from our sources. They rushed a $400,000 platform because speed was everything.
It was. And it was unusable just 6 months later.
What was the fatal flaw?
They focused only on the video part. They didn't think about the back end. So first, it couldn't integrate with their old electronic medical record system, their EMR. But the absolute showstopper was compliance.
Okay.
They failed to secure a business associate agreement, a BAA.
Right. For our listeners who might not be across that, what exactly is a BAA? The sources call skipping it a massive compliance nightmare.
And that's not an exaggeration. A BAA is a specific, legally required contract. It mandates how your software vendor must protect and handle your patient's private health information.
So without that in place...
Without it, you are in immediate and very serious breach of privacy regulations the moment a single piece of patient data touches that platform.
That is terrifying. So the hospital just had to pull the plug.
They had to. After trying a few fixes, their total sunk cost was $627,000. Well, they had to scrap the whole thing.
It really hammers home that point. Focusing on that initial cost will just inevitably lead you to an exponential failure cost.
It does. And that brings us to the second big mistake we see in the sources, which is this complete misunderstanding of complexity.
Especially around the technical compliance side of things. Executives compare building a custom platform to just, subscribing to an off-the-shelf tool.
And that is a very, very expensive misunderstanding. We see executives balk at a proper custom dev quote, say $250K to $500K. And instead, they'll opt for a cheap generic option for maybe $50,000. They see the low price and think they're saving money.
But the data shows those savings just evaporate, right? They turn into these bloated expenses down the line.
They do. Our analysis shows the total 3-year cost of that cheap platform balloons to over $550,000.
Wow.
You spend years just adding expensive patches, trying to force a consumer tool to handle enterprise-level healthcare compliance. The irony is that the custom build, done right, is actually the most predictable and often cheaper path over 3 years.
Because you avoided all that rework.
Exactly. You built it right the first time.
So let's talk about that technical complexity they're underestimating. It's not just about getting a video stream working, is it?
No, not at all. It's about what that stream is carrying and where it needs to land securely. We're talking about critical infrastructure for Australian healthcare.
So that means things like end-to-end encryption, multi-factor authentication.
All of that, plus specific session management, and of course, strict adherence to the Privacy Act, 1988.
And then there's integration, connecting the platform to all the existing medical systems.
That is often the deepest technical hurdle. You need seamless, secure integration for My Health Record, for Medicare billing, and crucially, with the electronic health record systems.
The EHRs.
Yes, often using complex, modern standards like HL7 FHIR. That's the global standard for exchanging this kind of information securely. If your vendor doesn't deeply understand FHIR, your system is basically a useless island.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. This brings us to what our sources are calling the hidden crisis of rapid development. Let's talk about AI cowboys and vibe coding.
This is well, it's the natural consequence of that implementation frenzy meeting, easy-to-access AI. The AI cowboy comes in and promises these unrealistic speeds and prices.
And they do it using vibe coding.
Yeah, vibe coding. They're generating entire code bases from really vague prompts using AI tools, but with no rigorous security testing. And critically, no real understanding of the Australian regulatory landscape.
So the code might look like it works on the surface, but underneath, the security and the structure are just fundamentally flawed.
Precisely. They're relying on the vibe that the AI produced something acceptable. But the analysis shows AI-generated code has a 20% error rate built in, and 73% of these projects accumulate severe technical debt almost instantly.
And an AI doesn't inherently understand the Privacy Act.
No, it just copies patterns it's seen before, and that often includes copying critical security flaws.
And we have a pretty catastrophic example of this bargain approach.
The Sydney Healthcare Group case is, well, it's sobering. They hired a firm offering AI-powered rapid development for $80,000.
80 grand. It sounds like a steal.
It felt like a steal.
Yeah.
But 6 months in, a mandatory security audit flagged 43 critical security vulnerabilities.
43.
43. Everything from unencrypted data storage to just massive compliance holes.
So what was the real final cost of that $80,000 bargain?
The platform was a write-off, completely unsalvageable. They had to hire a proper firm to rebuild the whole thing from scratch. The final tally was $650,000.
Wow. That's over 8 times the original price.
8 times. Plus, they lost 14 months of telehealth service revenue. The cheap choice is consistently the expensive disaster.
So how does an Australian executive avoid becoming another one of those statistics? It seems the answer isn't rushing, and it's definitely not chasing the cheapest quote.
No.
It points directly to one crucial, non-negotiable step, doesn't it? The discovery phase.
Absolutely. The research from the Standish Group confirms it. 68% of software projects that skip a comprehensive discovery phase fail or need major rework.
And the cost overruns are huge.
They average 3.5 times the original estimate. Investing in proper planning is the single best risk mitigation strategy you have.
I love the iceberg analogy here. The executive thinks they know what they need, but that's just the tip, the visible part.
Exactly. Discovery is what reveals the critical, massive infrastructure that's hiding below the waterline.
The visible requirements are things like, video calls and scheduling.
Right. But discovery uncovers the real complexity. Things like mapping clinical workflows for 20 different specialties, or the EMR integration needed across 5 regional offices.
Or mental health privacy protocols, accessibility needs.
Exactly. Especially when, 35% of your patient base might be over 70 and need a much simpler interface. These are things you only find when you look properly.
Let's look at the Brisbane Clinic case. They started with a rough estimate of $180,000. How did discovery change that picture?
Well, that initial vague request gave them the $180K number. But after a proper discovery phase, they realized they had 3 legacy EMR systems that all needed unique integrations. They had different patient demographics needing special user experience work, and a highly complex Medicare billing workflow. The accurate, detailed estimate then became $420,000.
Now, on the surface, $420K sounds worse than $180K.
It does.
But the value there is that they got the accurate cost for a solution that would actually work and be compliant. They avoided that $650K catastrophe.
Precisely. Discovery gave them budget certainty. It let them make informed decisions about what to prioritize, rather than being blindsided by constant change orders, is the difference between guessing and knowing.
So let's quickly detail the C9 gold standard process. What happens in that structured 4-week deep dive?
It's very targeted. It kicks off with stakeholder workshops to get executive and clinical leads on the same page. Then we do a technical deep dive on all the existing infrastructure.
Right.
Week 3 is intensive user research and workflow mapping. We're actually observing clinical staff. And by week 4, all that data gets synthesized into a comprehensive solution design, which gives you that detailed, accurate cost.
And that upfront investment, which is what, maybe $8,000 to $50,000, it quantifiably pays for itself.
It absolutely does. That small investment prevents potential rework costs of $150K, $500K, or even more, and it slashes your overall project risk by 68%. It's just essential business insurance for a C-level exec.
Okay, so moving past discovery, once development starts, what are the strategic advantages executives should be demanding to mitigate risk and manage cash flow?
A strategic approach has to be phased. Instead of one single massive project, you break it down into manageable stages.
And that allows for an early return on investment,
Yeah,
an early ROI.
that's the key. For instance, phase 1 might launch with one crucial feature that immediately saves the organization, say, $8,000 a month in admin costs.
So you're generating operational savings in the early phases that can then help fund the later stages of development.
Exactly. It's like a critical strategic advantage.
Yeah.
In one comparison we looked at, the traditional approach was still over $300,000 in the red at month 16.
And the phased approach.
The strategically phased approach was ROI positive by month 16. It shifts development from being a cash sink to a self-funding operational asset.
Another huge anxiety for executives is vendor lock-in. We've all seen companies held hostage because they don't actually own their own code base.
Yeah, that's why the knowledge transfer philosophy is so important.
Mhm.
The client has to own 100% of the code. Full stop.
And that means comprehensive documentation.
Comprehensive documentation,
Yeah.
using industry standard technologies. You have to be able to switch vendors or bring the project in-house without begging for access to some proprietary system.
And finally, pricing clarity. You can't plan a budget on meaningless indicative pricing.
No, you can't. A quote that says, between $150,000 and $300,000 is useless for financial planning.
Right.
But discovery-based pricing offers certainty. For example, $245,000, plus or minus only $18,000. You can only get that certainty after you've done the discovery work.
And a lot of that cost efficiency comes from C9's hybrid team model, right? Blending senior Australian architects with specialized offshore talent.
That blend is key. It delivers significant cost savings, we're talking 50 to 60%, while maintaining perfect communication and quality because the senior leadership stays right here in the Australian time zone.
It's efficiency without sacrificing quality.
Exactly.
So let's bring it all home. We have to go back to that central question for every Australian healthcare executive. Can you really afford to get this wrong?
You can't. The consequences are just devastating. I mean, compliance fines alone can range from $100,000 up to $50 million.
In this accelerating telehealth market, the choice seems pretty clear. You either invest in proper plan development with an experienced partner who gets the Australian landscape.
Or you risk joining that 73% of failed implementations.
C9 is Australia's leading custom software, apps, integration, and database developer company. We specialize in providing this kind of enterprise-grade consultation software for medical services.
We're here to help you get these complex projects right the first time.
We want to make sure you avoid that $650,000 emergency rebuild. And the next step is simple. We'd encourage you to book the free 45-minute consultation mentioned in the source material.
It's an honest assessment and a chance to get a tailored discovery phase proposal.
You can find out more and take that crucial first step at www.c9.com.au.
And make sure you click that follow button.
And share this deep dive with other Australian business owners and C-level executives who really need to hear this.
And for a final thought, consider the long-term non-financial cost. The damage to your reputation, the staff turnover that comes from forcing your dedicated clinicians to use a poor, failing system. That frustration far outweighs any initial savings from a cheap quote. That is the true risk of operating with incomplete information.